You're listening to Jagged Edge podcast with Sarah Fondrest, and she is a past school leader. She's a parent. She's a single mom. She's a caregiver to many, and she's a mentor to other leaders. She works as a consultant for AMI USA, meaning Association Montessori International, United States. And she is also working at a school in DC as an administration director of admissions and quite a few other businesses she's got going on. So we're going to listen to a lot about how Sarah does it all, juggling all the balls up in the air and look as beautiful as she does today.
Thank you.
So Sarah and I have been talking a lot about, school needs, having boards and being part of the board and all it takes. So not only Sarah being a head of school and working with a board, she also is a parent of two children. So, Sarah, tell us a little bit about how you got yourself into the Montessori journey and how old are your children now?
Yeah, great questions. So my children, I have two children. I have a 9-year-old boy and I have an 11-and-a-half-year-old daughter. And they're both still in Montessori since birth. I like to think in utero, but they've held steady and they're still taking it in at school and at home. In terms of my journey, I guess it goes way back to 40 some years ago. I actually went to Montessori as a child. I believe I started in Chicago where I was born, and then we moved to Detroit and I went to Montessori there. And I only did primary, so I stopped around 5 maybe. And then as I was graduating college many years later, I got a letter in the mail to do a Montessori training that had a master's program. And I figured, great, all in one swoop. I'm going to get this amazing training and get a master's degree. Yeah, it was day one I was sold. I took my primary training. So that was in 99. I taught primary for several years. And then I went back to do the assistance to infancy training. And then left there and taught for a couple years with toddlers and then kind of flip-flop between primary and toddlers. And then decided I wasn't finished and I needed to go to Italy to take the elementary training to get, well, one, to see Italy, obviously, but then to get the full picture. I was really curious and interested about, children from birth through elementary. So I did that. That was probably over the course of maybe 11 years, 12 years, something like that. And while I was in Italy, actually, I had a couple parents reach out to me and we decided in a very short time, maybe a week, that we would start a school. It was very naive, but very serendipitous and amazing. And so I founded the Del Rey Montessori School in Alexandria, Virginia. And that was, I guess, in 2011. I like to tell people it was my first child. My daughter was born in 2013. So the school is my first child. And as you can imagine, it takes a lot of work. So I compare it to birthing a child, quite frankly. And then after that, you mentioned at some point, I think that I'm a consultant. I work with AMI USA as a consultant at the primary level. So I get to travel throughout the US and visit schools, which is lovely. And then just last summer, so this past June, I stepped down from my position as the head of school and decided I wanted to do something different and launched a couple businesses. I started a private consulting business for Montessori, obviously, because that's like my whole life. And while I was doing that, I saw a need for supporting leaders, really. So supporting administrators. One of my experiences as a head of school was that it doesn't matter how many great people you have, you never have enough help. So my goal, I opened a Montessori virtual assistant, which is just that, a virtual assistant to help with all the tasks that need help with, right? And I'm virtual, so it works. And then this past October, when I was trying to launch those two businesses, I had a colleague who's the head of school at a school in DC reach out and ask me to join as their admissions director. So now I'm the admissions director at Aiden Montessori School in DC. And I have these side businesses and I work for AMI USA and I'm a mom, a single mom, like you said. And so I'm like bopping all over the place. And I don't know, I want to say figuring out life, but figuring out myself and trying to be useful and trying to be helpful and trying to pay it forward because, it took a long time to get where I was and where I am. And I had a lot of really phenomenal people support me along the way. So my hope is to pay that forward and to support people as they go into their own journey.
Yeah, that's lovely. And I think you're going to be able to do that through this podcast, encourage others who are also on their journey. And I think we're all on a journey of some sort together. Sarah, we've been talking about your background and how you're just, I mean, that's the only image that keeps coming up to my hands is not the plates, but just the balls up in the air. But you seem to be doing this well because you practiced that skill for a while. So let's talk about balancing family and leadership because you actually have a lot of knowledge and you've taken all of these courses and have the training, and now you're actually implementing all of those. Now you're a single mom of an 11-and-a-half-year-old, you said, and a son who is 9. How do you balance the demands of parenting and the responsibility of leading your job duties plus all the desires that you have because you're constantly creating?
It forces me to figure out how I'm going to do it, right? I was thinking about the Montessori and how my kids are 9 and 11 now. And because they have experience in Montessori, and because from since birth, they've been in my home being participatory in all the activities, now I don't have to do as much as I once did, right? So my children can make meals. They can make breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And my daughter, last week I walked in on my daughter at breakfast time on a school day using a hand mixer to put whipped cream that she made from scratch on her coffee. But I think this lifestyle, this Montessori lifestyle that I live and I embrace and embody, it's what my children are used to. So I think much of it is they've journeyed with me in practical life skills, I guess you could say, right? So taking care of themselves, taking care of the household, participating when they can, and really inviting them to do that. But obviously, that's not all of it because they're only 9 and 11. And, it's taken me years to get where I am. I mean, I think it's really difficult. And I think, leadership in general is really difficult. So I think it's being highly organized. I think that's a part of it. If I didn't have a Google Calendar, I would lose my mind. I don't know how people did it 20 years ago. But it's also prioritizing and putting the things first that are important. And I feel like as a woman, as a single mother, as a leader, you often get sucked into everybody else's responsibilities and not your own. So I can honestly tell you the last several years, I haven't done a great job of taking care of myself because there's been fires all around me. And maybe not fires, maybe that's dramatic, but you put so much into everything else that it's like everything else has to feel good before you can feel good. But then also, how do I change that? So I feel like to some degree, it's still a work in progress. I mean, like you said, I'm juggling a lot of things, but that also brings me joy, I think. Like I said, I like the idea of paying it forward and helping people. And if I can be of service to others, including my children or my neighbors or a family member, then
Yes, I think I was talking with Jim, who's a professor at a university for 50 years teaching Adlerian psychology. We were talking about just that contribution and inviting children to support us. And it's a journey, but there's stressors there are negative stressors and then there are positive stressors. And you're speaking about it's not always going to be peachy or great because we all look for this balance. And that's what we were talking about earlier today. The balance. But what is the balance? There is no such thing as balance because balance lives in our mind and our perception of what it looks like, which might be so different from person to person. And when you're talking about like truth is, it's going to be hard and it is hard. And I think when I asked you the questions, like sometimes we think as even when you have a partner or grandparents, we have this expectation that leads to so much discouragement when we don't meet those. And what you're just explaining and talking about it is the journey, and you feel fulfilled even though you have so many balls up in the air or so many projects going, but it brings you joy. So there are things that bring you joy, and there are things that you're doing with your young ones to invite them the skills or deliver the skills that you're looking for in supporting them as they become adults. And now I want to like sort of go into this dual roles, right? So how is both being an educator and an administrator influence your approach to serving students, serving parents, and staff while nurturing a very strong community where all of these pieces kind of work together?
Yeah, it's I like to think of it like a spider web, right? Like cosmic education. Like everything's interrelated and you can't do one thing without thinking how it's going to impact another thing. But thinking about all the things you have to do, it's that in leadership where you have to think of all the participants and one decision, how it's going to impact everybody. It requires strategy, it requires foresight, it requires errors, it requires self reflection, it requires surveys and asking people. But overall, it's impacted everything I do. I think everything I do has been impacted by being an educator and a leader because I can't let go of that.
And I think what you're just talking about it is often we are juggling and managing a lot of things. And how much pressure do we have on having it all go perfectly well? We're going to drop the balls once in a while, but that's the journey of learning. We make mistakes and we figure things out. And it's the beauty of it all. Sarah, you created this school after you've graduated and created a community of teachers, parents, and yourself included. What were some of the steps that you took to creating an atmosphere where children, parents, yourself, and other caregivers who were involved felt like this was a place where they all belong, and then this trust that you speak about?
In all my Montessori trainings, we focus on the child, follow the child, everything's child centric, right? Which is great. But where are the adults in that? How do we make the adults feel important? How do we make the adults feel included? How do we acknowledge the adults? Welcoming people, having them feel valued, thinking about their dignity, thinking about who they show up as. And I can tell you, just like over the years, there's also that process of letting go of the things that are important to put more value into the things that are meaningful. So something as simple as having like a dress code as a school policy, and then realizing like, hey, people are going to come into this place and they're going to lead with their hearts and they're going to do great work. And if they want to show up in this particular outfit, cares? Like, who cares? Right? Because that also makes them feel included, not makes them, but helps them to feel that sense of inclusion because we're inviting them to show up as themselves. I think that honesty and transparency are really important as well. And that can be really hard in leadership because you can't always share the things that are happening, and people don't like to have to make up their own story. So, that rapport, building trust, having an open door, being real. I find sometimes in this work that people have a hard time not being themselves, which I think I took me a long time to be myself. I'm still learning to be myself all these years. It's a lot. And I feel like, since COVID, our society's changed a lot. And so, what was happening 7 years ago might not be happening now. And that might be an amazing thing. So that connection, that rapport, you can't have that trust without building a relationship on the front end.
What was your process of sort of meeting with the parents or enrollment that you got to know the families before that first day of school? Or did you get to know them after students arrived to your school?
It's a little of both. I mean, I think that, we've always done at the school I was at, the school I started, we did events before school started so people could come together and meet, even during the enrollment process, just doing observation, welcoming families in to see the school, letting them observe and see what's happening in the classrooms. It's like you're selling something, right? Like, we don't want to talk about it like that, but like, it's like you got to channel your inner car salesman. I know I'm not supposed to say that, but if we want to sell this method of education that's amazing, we have to have people sit in it and take it in and really see it. So giving people that opportunity to see what's unfolding, I think is really important on the front end, right? To get them in and to get them excited. But then again, building those relationships. Like, there's parks we can go to. There's, ice cream parties we can have. There's so many opportunities for people to come together. And again, like, since COVID, that stopped for so long. And to be able now to come back to this place where people are craving that social interaction, Yeah, I would say that, like, just being welcoming and, inviting people into your space to see the work that we're doing and to see how excited the teachers are and how good they are at the work they do and the assistants as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think that connection piece does allow the interaction and support for caregivers, the parents, if they don't have family nearby, knowing other families and getting one another support by, hey, could you please take my daughter to school while I have the business meeting or I'm traveling? It really, as schools, it's creating those beautiful environments, family away from family. It's really important, even especially after COVID.
Yeah. Well, and I would say, I live in Northern Virginia in the Washington, D.C. area. Everyone's not from here. Like, it's a very transient area. I've lived here for 20 some, no, that's not true, 38 years maybe. And every best friend I've ever had has moved, which is great because now I can travel all over the country, sometimes out of the country. But that village becomes important. I don't have any family here. So the people that I connect with become the people that I say, can you pick my kids up from school because I have, to go on a trip or whatever. So it's paramount. I feel like in this area and working at a school in DC and have worked in Northern Virginia, that's all you see is families that are yearning. They want people to be in their village because their village isn't here. So it's really important to connect parents in that regard, especially in areas like this where everybody's from a different location.
Yes, I think the hats that you wear as a school leader, it's almost like, really to care for the children, but almost be a parent, grandparent, cousin, aunt, and every role that you could possibly imagine, and just be present to listen to the parents and to support the teachers, support the parents. So, having done that, what is it that you did to support your self care?
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, I have a cleaning crew comes to my house once a month, and that is my self-care. It sounds silly, but I don't like the smell of chemicals, but when I walk up to my house and I smell that like Lysol, it brings me greatest joy on the planet. Sometimes pedicures, sometimes a massage. I love wine. You will catch me drinking wine almost every single night. I travel, like I love traveling, like even whether it's business or personal, it's really important to me to travel, and I've brought my kids along for the ride. Now they love it. Now they're asking my daughter just asked yesterday, we're trying to plan a summer trip. She mentioned Paris, Cayman Islands, Costa Rica. I'm like, that's not one trip. Like, that's like multiple different continents. We can't do that. Those things, but also talking. Like, I have a therapist, and my therapist is very important to me. She's a very big part of my self care. And then having good neighbors who I can share that glass of wine with. When I took my first primary training in 99, my trainer, Janet McDonald, said, every day you walk into that classroom, forgive yourself for all the things you did yesterday. And I think that's the same thing, right? Is like every day and to wake up and think it's a new day. We say in Montessori, every day the child shows up as a new child, and every day we should treat them as such. I feel the same for adults. And every day, whatever I did yesterday, whatever choice that I made that was not great or that I'm anxious about or whatever, it is a new day. And I'm going to come into this new day with, whatever optimism and joy I can have.
That's pretty powerful. It's powerful because forgiveness of our expectation, unmet needs, mistakes that we make. I mean, as a school leader, I remember just for days really feeling anxious and upset about decisions that I had to make or choices I had made. And sometimes you feel lonely at the top.
One of the things that I realized maybe a couple years ago was that I'm a single mom. And when I come home, I'm responsible and I'm in charge and I'm on call. I'm a single mom again. I'm in charge. I'm the person. I'm responsible. I'm making the decisions. Because to your point, it's lonely. Like, as the head of school, there's often information that's confidential that you cannot share. And it's often when it is something like that, you want to share it. You need somebody to talk to about it. And it can't be anybody there for lots of different reasons. And it is. And I don't know if you saw, but in the last couple days, the attorney general just like declared that parenting And I mean, it resonates. And single parents feel the loneliest. Like, I'm here to say, maybe it's just my own experience, but it's hard. And it's really hard being lonely, especially in a time where people are so captivated by technology and, they're inside and we're not going outside as much as we used to. But then I have kids, so I don't really go out that much because here we are at the house, right? But yeah, it's hard. Loneliness sucks. It is. It's very lonely in leadership.
And then also, we have talked about this expectation. Everyone always assumes that s- each child has two parents there with them, and being a single parent. Talk to us a little bit about that. And I'm grateful for your candid conversation today.
Well, and I'll say it's even more so in private education. I mean, it's a very interesting experience for me and how isolating that is because there's an expectation that everybody's married. Also, FYI, my kid's father and I are not together. We live in two separate households. Like, I got to give them all my business before they even come over, right? Because that, you know, gives them more information so they don't feel uncomfortable. Because in the end, they're, like if I have to correct them now, they feel a sense of shame for assuming, right?
What would you like to see happen that would be more respectful to you?
I think that's a great question because I think as humans, we are given this brain where we judge, right? We think, we're thinkers. That's what separates us from other mammals, right? It's our human gifts. In elementary, we talk about that, the gifts of the mind, the heart, and the hands, right? And so you can't help but assume, like, if you're in a community where it's predominantly two people, you're just going to assume everybody's part of a two people partnership, right? I don't know. I'll have to think more about this, but that assumption I think is hard. And
I think,
maybe asking people not to assume, but how you
yeah.
do, I don't know. And maybe it's, for the community to think about too is, how does that look on forms? How does that look on conversations that teachers have? And like I appreciate early on you said the word caregiver a couple times because also it's not just parents that are raising children, right? So I think a lot of it too is bias training, right? And I say that myself too, like I would benefit from that experience as well. I have benefited from that experience.
We had over 20 languages spoken, and I quickly learned a lot of things and incorporated positive discipline based on Adlerian psychology into my school. And one of the things, especially during COVID or right before, I began to learn is asking the parents before that tour, that when we have the tour, we're asking some questions like, who lives in a home with your young person, is it, and is there nuclear family nearby? Are there grandparents? Who's going to pick them up? So we had created an intake form that sort of gave us some of these questions and answers to be able to guide the parents. And then we, in our staff meeting, talked about those.
Hmm.
Hey, this parent, are you Mrs. Classroom? I think it could be really painful for our young people in different holiday times, right? It's painful.
Oftentimes the uncomfortable feeling is the other parent who's assumed and I have to correct them. That's the part where it gets awkward of that assumption they make different. And I mean, truth be told, it feels like anyways, a very small group of people who are not together.
Yeah.
And that's the reality I face for the education. Everything's different. How do you want us to regard you? What is the name you want to be called? What information do you want us to share with the teachers? That's also exciting and powerful to give people a voice space.
And I thank you for this conversation. It's more about more curiosity, more questions, more difficult conversation that leads to two people being maybe uncomfortable at start, however, creating that safe space because there's always going to be an elephant in the room when we don't talk about a lot of different things.
Yes.
Yeah. So how has Montessori shaped your personal life, parenting, and leadership style? You've taken so many different degrees or courses in various age levels.
Yeah. It has impacted every part of my life. My first Montessori training I took right out of college. So I was 21, I believe. I thought years ago, I thought about this where people, there's that saying, what is it? Something about you're not who you are at work, or like work doesn't define me. People would say work doesn't define me. And I'd always say my work absolutely defines me. I think, Montessori, grace and courtesy, just that alone, like there's no method of education that I know of that has a like a pedagogy, if you will, for teaching manners, because that's what it is in the end. I mean, it's more than manners, but the grace and courtesy and, the respect that we give children, it's infiltrated every part of my life. I can't separate it. I don't want to separate it. Being, 21 when I first took the training, and being mindful, like you talked a little bit about mindfulness, I think before we started this podcast, but just being in tune with development, it has defined me as a human. It has defined my parenting. I'm proud of the fact that I have leaned on Montessori. My friends, I have so many amazing friends, Montessori friends. I feel like it's grounded me in so many important foundational skills. I like that practical life piece, right? Like just taking care of my house and gardening, and like I live in Northern Virginia. I'm not a rural girl. I saw Brussels sprouts grow for the first time. My mind was blown. I was like, what is this? We've got to learn more. Children, like everything I do is foundational in the trainings I've taken, the things I've learned, communication. I think I've learned a lot about communicating with people just through the work that I've done in leadership and consulting and teaching. Like you have to say hard things sometimes as a teacher. And so, to be able to have those experiences, these people are profoundly knowledgeable with child development and life.
Absolutely. They're individualized. They get their training specialized. And for those who are listening, and if you're wondering, well, how do you become a Montessori guide? Well, Association Montessori International has a website with locators for different training centers. I became a Montessori guide because my young children were in an AMI Montessori school. And then when we came to California, we wanted that same type of school. And when we couldn't find it, my husband just said, well, why don't you become a teacher if you want it a
Right.
certain way? And I was like, are you sure? And he goes, yeah, if you want to change your career, go for it. And that was the best thing I did, Sarah. I think you and I agree. It's like it just inside out. It was like everything we did in our home. It was complementary, right? The grace and courtesy we speak about, how we speak, how we walk, how we communicate, how we greet. It was more about what to do versus what not to do. Because I think we get into telling our family members or children constantly all the things they shouldn't do. But when we show them how to do everything, including, when I took my training in primary, we used to light a match and show children how to light a match. So they didn't just practice on their own and burn themselves or hurt themselves. So when we show them how to safely and let them know not to do this, we just want you to know, you take the energy out of it so they don't hide and do something that's dangerous. So that's one of the bigger points I wanted to make today about the training and what kind of separates Montessori from some of the other trainings that we have. What are some of the advice that you could have for future educators and leaders?
I know you talk about this in positive discipline. I've dabbled a little bit in positive discipline, but I think in the end, with all things education, leadership, everything comes back to us as the adult, right? In Montessori, we talk a lot about the prepared environment, and we put so much emphasis on the physical prepared environment. I like to think a lot about the emotional prepared environment and really trusting that and preparing that for yourself. And if you have it prepared for yourself, then you're able to share it with other people. And I know, like positive discipline, again, like you're focused, like you can't change other people's behaviors. You just can't, right? You can't, somebody else has a bias. You can't change their bias, but you can work to change your own and figure out your own. So I think for whether it's educators, leadership, it's really self-reflecting. Like what is it you want? How do you want to impact others What is it you desire? What age group do you want to work with? What brings you joy? It's a big question because what brings you joy right now might not bring you joy in 15 years, right? And that's the other thing to think about. But I think it's stay true to yourself. Don't give up on your own values and morals and who you are. Find a village. I think that, right now with all this loneliness, find a village, create a village. Like you said, like your husband said, if you can't find it, you got to become it, right? Yeah. And I believe that. Like, I don't believe in stagnation. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm going to go with it, right? I don't want to be stagnant. I don't believe in settling. And, I always feel like if you build it, they will come, period. If it's a neighborhood barbecue, if it's a happy hour at your house, if it's building a school, starting a podcast, I believe that if you build it, they will come. And you cannot build it until you take that leap of faith, have trust in yourself and who you are and who you show up as. And then big things I feel like come from that. They have to. I believe they have to.
Mm. Thank you for that, Sarah. I started the podcast because maybe if we reach two people, and we can help support them, then we've done our job. But if you're listening, you like what you've heard, don't forget to subscribe and follow. And Sarah, it's been a great pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for your candid conversation today and being so open and taking the air out of having to be perfect.
I appreciate you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for talking with me. And I appreciate all the work you're doing to empower women. And I'm sure more than two people are showing up. So this is great. So thanks for including me. I appreciate you.
Thank you. And we're creating a village, Sarah. So hopefully more people will include more people versus break one another down. I've experienced both, and I would much prefer a cohesive environment where I feel like I belong.
Agreed. Hallelujah to that. Yes.